You are listening to Spark Radio on KMRELP 102.3 FM in beautiful Bellingham, Washington, your community, your voice, your station. And this is Are You Serious? I'm Matt Benoit, the host of this comedy interview program where local comedians get real, talking about personal challenges and how those relate to their craft. My guest today is Bellingham comedian Nate Holk. Nate, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm doing all right. So, just a little general background on like your family, where you went to school, growing up, that sort of thing.
So I grew up mostly in Bremerton.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was in the Navy, but he retired when I was still in elementary school, and he was an accountant after that. My mom was a nurse and went on to be a nursing teacher. I have one older brother. He's 3.5 years older than me. That's my brother Eric. He's a good guy. And so I lived in Bremerton all through high school, came up to Bellingham for college, went to Western, and I like to say I took the scenic route through college. Took me 7 years to get a bachelor, but I did get it.
Nice.
So
super senior.
Yeah. Just took my time looking around, waiting to register for the classics that were only offered once a year and filled up before you register for them.
Oh, God.
Like
That's
3 years
good.
in a row for the same class.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then that's kind of been in Bellingham for most of the last 12 years, I guess.
What was your bachelor's in?
So I double majored in linguistics and philosophy, but I finished the linguistics degree. I'm like 2 classes away from my philosophy degree.
Okay. So the philosophy degree, the route of another Bellingham comedian, Brett Emerson, who's been on this program.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. So, so it's kind of a small nuclear family, just your brother and your 2 parents.
Yeah, me and my brother, my 2 parents.
Are your parents still in Bremerton? Or?
My mom is still in Bremerton. My dad passed away just under a year ago in last April.
That's right.
So.
That's right. I remember when that happened. Yeah. Yep. And then what about your brother? Where is he at?
My brother is down in California in the Bay Area. He is a programmer for Google now.
Wow. So he's raking in the bucks.
Well, yeah, he also lives in the most expensive part of the world to live in.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. It's kind of funny. Like you see starting jobs down there, and you're like, oh, they're starting jobs like $80,000. It's like, yeah, because you need to be able to survive on that in the middle of San Francisco.
No, and even if that's all he was making, he wouldn't be able to live in that part of the country.
Yeah,
really.
Rent is insane. Rent's like, I mean, apartments go for like over $3,000 down there. It's crazy.
Yeah, he says you can buy like a nice shack for about $1 million.
Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, like, if you ever go up to Vancouver, like, Vancouver's crazy. Like, the apartments are like, I saw an ad one time when I was up there a couple years ago, and it was like, beautiful beautiful apartments starting at $3 million. Like, oh, starting at, wow, that's a steal. Like, what? Good
That just means there's some wiggle room in the negotiation.
Yeah,
All right, so I see you're asking for $3 million. I'll offer $100,000. We'll meet in the middle.
We'll meet in the middle, yeah. I'm not sure you could meet in the middle on that.
It's weird that pot's legal now, and we're starting to get used to it around here. But there's other states that just recently became so lucky. Like, I honestly didn't think that I would live through the end of prohibition of weed. And yet now, someday, I'm going to be sitting down with my grandkids, and they're going to look up at me all wide-eyed and be like, you mean pot used to be illegal? And I'll say, yep, and I used to be the 21st century version of a bootlegger.
What are your first memories of, like, either, like, seeing stand-up or going to, like, what's your first memories of comedy, I guess?
I don't know. It's hard to say my first experience with comedy. The first time I think I remember, like, genuinely watching comedy was, like, my first couple years in college, probably freshman or sophomore year of college.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of early in the file sharing days,
yes.
and it was back when like everyone who lived on campus could just like share movies with each other, and like I remember downloading a couple of specials and like Robin Williams and I like Dave Chappelle back when he had Chappelle's Show, and obviously like looked up his comedy and everything like that. But I think like the first one that I really remember is as far as like a stand-up comedy special was probably Robin Williams Live at the Met was the first one I remember watching.
Sweet. Yeah, that was kind of when I got introduced to stand-up. Like, I remember my dad had We had a vinyl pressing of Reality What a Concept, and then also heard Live at the Met, like when I was still in middle school at the time, and it was like, that kind of got me into it.
Yeah, I always thought Live at the Met was interesting because it was like, recorded in the 80s or whatever, and Robin Williams starts his set with a whole ton of energy, and then like literally like 30 minutes into the show, his energy level noticeably drops for the rest of the show.
Yeah, and he's just like, it's interesting when you listen to the performances, but when you actually watch it, it's just like he's like covered in sweat and just so incredible energy, and then
and possibly taking stimulants.
Possibly, yeah. I guess, how old are you?
I'm 30.
You're 30? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, like, at what point, kind of just watching stand-up specials, kind of enjoying comedy like most people do, at what point did you think that maybe you wanted to actually try doing stand-up?
Probably just within the last few years. Because I have this thing where I tend to like pick things up very quickly, and I'll learn things quickly, and so I have the tendency to like see people doing things and then like wonder if I can do it better. And so like a lot of the hobbies I've picked over the years was like, hey, that guy can do it, but I bet I could do it better. And like so I saw somebody doing comedy, and obviously there's a lot of comedians I have a lot of respect for. I just saw like this one comedian, and I was like, hey, if he can do that, like I bet I could try it out too. And then probably what really gave me the gumption to go ahead and do it was I got turned on to another podcast, the Tony Hinchcliffe's Kill Tony podcast, and has a lot of comedians at various levels who come up and like do short comedic sets and then get feedback from professional comedians and that sort of thing, and just kind of watching that, like, and hearing them give the feedback on like what makes a good joke and what makes a bad joke, like I felt like I knew a lot of what went on behind it, and I was like, yeah, let's just try it out. If they can do it, I can try it out too. And first time I did it, it was a lot of fun. It was a big rush. It's kind of like the first time I did karaoke. I remember having a big rush as far as the performance adrenaline or whatever, and it was fun, and it's still a fun challenge.
When was the first time you performed?
It's about a year and a half ago. It was like
the Green
August or September a year ago, so 2016, I guess.
Yeah.
In that time, and it was at the Green Frog.
And like, what do you remember? Like, did it go okay? What do you remember about it?
I remember, in my memory, it went really well.
Yeah.
No, but I remember like I had it planned out. Like I spent probably 3 or 4 weeks like working on the set or the material, like writing it, and then like spent most of a week just like rehearsing it. Like in any spare moment I got, I would just like say it aloud to myself, and like in my car I'd be saying it while I was driving, and then I'd time myself when I was doing it, and then I invited a bunch of friends to the show, which helped, I guess, to create an audience. And then of course they were gonna laugh at me probably whatever I did, but I remembered it, was confident through it, got laughs most of the times that I wanted to get laughs, and it was a lot of fun.
So in the time since, we all end up performing in weird places, but like, for you, what's probably the weirdest place you've performed so far? I feel like I know the answer to this, but I'm not sure. I want to see what you say.
I think I'd have to say the pizza place.
Yeah. Yep, and now defunct local pizza place in the Cordata area. We did some shows there for a brief time. I remember featuring in that room. You're literally holding a mic next to a soda machine.
Yeah. Your backdrop was a soda machine. People would be refilling their drinks in the middle of your set. It was because anytime the door opened, there'd be the ding dong on the bell.
Yeah, that'd be like, at that point you could just tell your joke and then offer to refill someone's soda because you were close enough. And it's
like a new way of handling it. Here, let me get that for you.
Yep. It was a weird place. That was the pizza place wasn't weird. The pizza was good.
Yeah,
actually.
The pizza's delicious. I really miss that place. I miss the food. Yeah. Bob, if you're listening, come back.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, it was not the. It was a place where you could just work on stuff because nothing really mattered.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't set up for performances. It was just like a restaurant where there was a lot of space that wasn't getting used. And I was like, hey, friend of mine who owns this restaurant, would you mind if we put up a microphone over here and like some friends talk into it and like say vulgar things? And he was like, yeah, I love comedy and like I love vulgarity. You should totally do that.
I love vulgarity.
There'd be a 4-year-old in the line waiting for something. Bob didn't care.
The family's here. I want them to hear fucks. Like, what? No. Like,
it's like, yeah, the dirtier the better. I don't want there to be any censorship.
Yeah.
I support that. I will make sure that it was worth saying that.
Yes. So I don't know. Do you have like a favorite performance space or like set you've had that you really remember? You're like, yeah, this is good. I can, or especially one where you thought like, I can definitely do this. Like, you know, I can do stand up.
Probably the one that's the best combination of easy to get on the stage and like has the ambience of being a professional performance venue is the Upfront Theater. And it's just kind of nice because there's the ramp up to the green room, and then the green room at least is like the same level as the stage.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the biggest obstacle for me is getting onto the stage itself, because there are very few stages that don't have stairs to get up to them. Even
Very
like
true.
the Shakedown show has a ramp that goes
Yep.
up to a step to get onto the
Yeah.
stage. So that's the biggest thing for me.
Sorry about all the hassle getting me on stage. I'm currently involved in a complicated insurance fraud claim. Those nice fellows were willing to help me keep up appearances.
One reason you talk about ramps, obviously, is because listeners are not, if they haven't seen you or don't know you in person, as we sit here at this table, you obviously are in a wheelchair. And so first off, before we talk about why you're in a wheelchair, do you ever feel the reception you get and that you've gotten as a disabled comedian is it different depending on where you perform, like maybe like the Upfront versus the Shakedown, or do you ever feel like there's a not necessarily a judgment? Do you feel that audiences perceive you more gingerly because you're disabled, or do you feel like you don't feel that?
I think they tend to be a little more forgiving of me.
Yeah.
Like I can get away with a little bit more sometimes. I think sometimes I haven't pushed that limit as much as I could even, at least from a content or an offensive standpoint. But other than that, I don't think there's a huge difference. They might be silently rooting for me a little bit more than like other people. Some people like, you want to see people bomb sometimes just to watch them squirm. But I don't get that indication necessarily.
I think one thing that I've seen you perform before, like obviously at the Green Frog, you could never get on the stage. So Timmy would always like spotlight, and then you'd be like at the foot of the thing because there were just stairs.
Well, I did get on the stage once there.
Oh, that's right.
That was when I did the feature show.
Yeah,
but
that's right. Yeah.
Most of the time they just bring up the main room lights a little bit, so that you kind of see me.
Do you feel like it's easier to get and keep people's attention because you're in a wheelchair? I don't know. Do you think that works in your favor?
Yes and no, and it's probably kind of one of those pluses and minus things, like most things are.
Yeah.
I mean, the advantage is, I'm different, I'm unique, I'm not like, even though I'm a straight white male, I'm not the same as the last straight white male that was up on stage and that sort of thing. So like in that regard, like they want to hear a new perspective. But the other thing is, if I'm not on the stage, then I'm not in the best place for the audience to be paying attention to me.
Yeah, exactly.
So like oftentimes like, either I'm not well lit up, or I'm not like centered in front of them, or, and it really, again, it depends all on the setup as far as like how much of a hindrance that is.
Right. Because like at the Upfront, it's not a hindrance at all, whereas at the Green Frog, it typically would have been.
Right. Yeah, and so like the Green Frog, it was always a little bit awkward, just kind of getting in position, and like again, the stage lighting wasn't directed towards me, and so. So there wasn't kind of that odd contrast between the audience and the performer from a lighting standpoint. And also I was just like, in front of the stage, like at face to face with the front, like 4 rows of tables. And then like I was actually below like all the back tables and everything like that. So it probably wasn't the best for just like, seeing, like, I don't think anybody like couldn't see me unless they're kind of, if it was more full up there in the back towards the bar or something like that. But yeah.
I'm very happy to be here, lucky to be on stage today. In fact, people tell me I'm lucky all the time, but it's not usually when you'd want people to tell you you're lucky. You know, like at a casino, or with the ladies. Usually when people tell me I'm lucky, it's like at a party, and someone showed up late, and all the seats are taken. Man, Nate, you're really lucky. You always have a place to sit. And while that's true, it's also what we call a silver lining. Like, yeah, it's a positive thing. There's just all this cloud stuff that goes with it. Sure, it's got some shine. It's still very clearly not the sun. Hey, Nate, you're really lucky. Your shoes probably never wear out. You're right. But I also can't use them for the very purpose they were designed for. Hey Nate, you're really lucky. You always have a great conversation starter. Right again. But the conversations usually end up being about somebody's second cousin who broke their toe 2 years ago and they had to spend a couple months in a wheelchair, which is why this person I'm talking to knows exactly what I'm going through. Hey Nate, you're really lucky. It's probably really easy for you to get lap dances. Alright, that one's actually pretty awesome. And whenever people tell me I'm lucky, I always try to tell them how I came to be so lucky. Because, well, why should I be the only lucky one? So I tell them what I did is I went snowboarding, I went off a 50-foot jump, and then, and this is the hard part, I intentionally landed upside down. Now I realize you might not be quite as badass as I am, so here's what we can do. A doctor once told me that what I did to my back was essentially the same thing that would have happened had I just smashed my spine with a sledgehammer. Well, I'm not selfish. I'm more than happy to share the luck. Back at home, I have a sledgehammer. We can make this happen for you. You too could be so lucky as to always have a place to sit at a party. No matter how late you show up. It could be standing room only, but not for you.
How long have you been in a wheelchair for?
It will be 14 years on Wednesday.
Okay, so you would have been 16 when the accident happened. Now, you are paraplegic, right? So
Yes.
just cannot use your legs. So, and there was the snowboarding accident that was, so how?
That's how it happened, yeah.
That's how it happened. So tell me about that. I mean, what do you remember?
Well, I remember the whole thing.
Yeah.
Everyone seems to be surprised by that, that I would remember that accident, but I was a good snowboarder. Not to brag or anything. Obviously, I wasn't as good as I thought I was or wanted to be.
Yeah.
But, you know, whenever you break your back snowboarding, I always try to make sure it's clear, like, that's not a beginner sort of an injury. You know, you have to be going big enough for something that bad to happen. But yeah, I was snowboarding as a Stevens Pass, and Stevens Pass is known for having a really, like a professional level terrain park. And normally I wasn't a fan of riding the terrain park. I prefer the backcountry with the, you know, cliffs and trees and that sort of thing, because then at least when you hit the ground it's softer. But in the terrain park it's all hard pack and everything. But I was riding with a group of friends that I didn't normally ride with, and they usually did the terrain park. So I was like, cool, I'll ride with you guys and show off. And I went off the 50-foot jump, and all of my buddies went off the small jump.
Oh.
And so, of course, I was giving them shit about that. So,
Yeah.
You know, the second time we went through it, I was talking to my buddy, Eric Retnar, who, if he's listening to this and still has, like, footage of all of my snowboarding, I still want that. Side note. But I was like, all right, Eric, tell you what, if I do, like, this really cool trick off the big jump, will you hit the big jump after me? Mm-hmm. And he's like, dude, if you could do that, I'll definitely hit it after you. I was like, okay, here we go. And then so, I went after this trick, and it was, for snowboarders, it was a butter to a switch 180, which isn't even that fancy of a trick, but it was like basically on the approach, I spun around, so I was riding backwards. And the problem was when I did that trick, it like threw my weight off balance. And so when I hit the jump, I was leaning too far forward. So when I tried to do the spin, I also did like half of a front flip and then looked up at the ground. Ooh. And that's obviously not where the ground's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I just kind of tucked and rolled and hit the ground. And once I stopped tumbling, I like remember reaching behind me and like pushing up with my arms. And then like, you know, I was going to try to stand up from there. And then like my legs didn't move at all, and like they didn't do that whole helping you stand up thing that they normally would. And so I just kind of took that as a sign that this is one of those scenarios where you're just supposed to lay still and wait for help, and that's what I did. My buddies obviously saw that happen, and Eric never hit the big jump, pussy.
Yeah.
And then they gave me the toboggan ride down the hill once ski patrol got there, and then ambulance to where they could bring a helicopter, and then helicopter to the hospital. And then the part that really I remember was when, I think they just transferred me onto the helicopter or whatever, and they were giving me shots of morphine and steroids and other things like that to kill the pain and try to minimize the damage. And I remember it being like the week before the soccer preseasons would happen. And I was like a big athlete before this happened.
Right.
I played sports pretty much year round. And it was like the high school soccer team was just like they had their unofficial indoor practices before the tryouts and before the season, that sort of thing. And I was all really excited for that. And it was like literally the weekend before that started. And I remember asking the person on the, the paramedic on the helicopter, I was like, so am I going to be able to try out for soccer still? And he's like, probably not.
Oh.
And then that's when it kind of really sunk in that this was a big deal.
So, I mean, you talk about the pain, like for anyone who's never broken their back or had any sort of major back, how painful was it? I mean, obviously you couldn't feel your legs, but I mean, I'm sure there was still a lot of back pain, right?
Yeah, and really, what's weird about that is that when the accident and the injury first happened, it didn't hurt. And also, anytime I've ever, been snowboarding and gone off a jump, I've never once felt the ground.
Yeah.
No matter how big the jump is or anything. Because if it's a small jump, it doesn't hurt. But if it's a big jump, there's so much adrenaline and, endorphins and, everything like that going through your system, you don't really feel anything when you hit the ground.
Because you just tried to, just stand up normally, right?
Yeah, I literally just, pushed up. I was like, oh, that was, probably not good. Let's see if, I can still get up. And, it didn't hurt at all at the time. It wasn't until, in probably an hour or two after the accident actually happened when it started hurting. But even then, anybody who knew me at that time would tell you that I was a real stoic person. I might have been, on a scale to 1 to 10, it might have been an 11, but I would tell you it was a 7, just, because I thought I was tough like that or whatever, which sometimes turns into a problem at the hospital because, they base their pain meds based on how bad you tell them that you're hurting. Yeah. So if I was trying to be a tough guy and didn't tell them I was hurting, I just hurt for longer. But
yeah, you're the one who pays the price for that. I guess.
Yeah, that was a weird tangent. But
after realizing a few days later that your life had permanently changed, I guess how long did it take you to really come to grips with that?
I always tell people I came to terms with a lot faster than my family did.
Yeah.
Honestly, and at that point in my life, I was young and still kind of had a little bit of a nihilist philosophy, whatever the situation is, just try to make the best of it, good or bad, it's just kind of what it is. And that was kind of the attitude that I took. It's well, this sucks, what's the best I can do? Obviously I can't, play soccer anymore, but, the things that I was still thankful for is, there was no, brain damage or head injury, so I could still, talk, I could think.
Yeah.
I've always been a reasonably smart guy, so at least I didn't lose that. Mm-hmm. And so I, as bad as it was, I still had a lot to be thankful for, was kind of how I looked at it.
So you have, I guess where do you stop having feeling, in your body?
That's a good question. So it's actually a little bit weird, because after my injury, some feeling did come back over a period of time, and so that actually caused the doctors to kind of re-diagnose me. At first they considered a complete spinal cord injury, and then that generally means that you don't get any return back. But then I got enough returns back that they're okay, we'll call it incomplete, even though it doesn't look like it. But to answer your question, on my right leg, I have sensation down to about my knee, and I can at least I can feel to the touch down to just below my kneecap there. And my left leg, I can feel to about the middle of my thigh. But as far as muscular function, it's
you cannot walk
diminished.
No,
yeah. Wouldn't be able to support weight with my hips or anything like that.
Right.
Now, when it comes to shopping, in general, not a fan. But I especially hate shoe shopping. It's hard buying new shoes. There's so many different options. They're all so expensive. None of them are very comfortable, I assume.
When you finally started doing comedy, how quickly did you feel the need to not just, to basically tell jokes about the fact that you're disabled? I mean, how that's the elephant in the room, obviously. You're in a wheelchair. Did you feel like you had any other choice? You're like, well, if I go up there and start doing this, I guess I should talk about...
Yeah. Well, I think in my first set, I spent the majority of my 4 minutes talking about it, or at least like some form of it, how being in a wheelchair impacts how I go through life and that sort of thing. Like, I think I mentioned going through the airports in a wheelchair or something like that. Anyone I tell I do stand-up comedy, they're like, oh, but you don't stand up. Like, do you make that joke? It's like, well, I would, but it's the most obvious joke ever. Like, fruit, no.
Yeah. Do you think that making fun of your condition, do you find that cathartic? Does it help you deal with the fact that you do have some limitations?
Yeah, I
guess you don't have a lot of limitations.
Yeah,
right?
And I think the use of the word limitations there is overstating things, because honestly, I don't feel like being in a wheelchair really holds me back from doing anything that I really want to do, honestly. Yeah. I mean, it certainly can make things a little more difficult, just getting into buildings that don't have, ramps or elevators or whatever, as
like
we
this
just
one.
figured out. But, like we still made it in. It just took a couple extra minutes or whatever. But that was kind of a tangent that... The simple answer is yes. I mean... I kind of like to find humor in the unfortunate things in life in general, and I think that's, and even as bad as things are, like, again, bad is such a relative term that I don't, like, even the worst situations, like, aren't necessarily inherently bad in themselves, but if you can find something that's funny about it, or if you can look at it in that sort of a funny way, I think that's worthwhile. And as far as, me and my, disability and how that enters my comedy, I don't think it's that I necessarily do it for me, in that, like, I'm talking about my disability so that I can feel better. Like I said, I've kind of come to terms with my disability, and I've kind of gotten used to it. But I see it as kind of an opportunity to educate people who, might not be aware of some of the differences or some of the challenges that that I deal with that they don't, obviously, but to do it in a funny way. Because I don't want to just pick, because sometimes, like, because of their ignorance, they'll do something insensitive, and they'll have the best of intentions and everything like that. They just don't know any better, you know. And so if there's a way that I can kind of open their eyes and make them less ignorant but not feel like jerks in the process, that seems like a benefit. There's a fine line between, like, being adaptable and just being lazy, because I broke my back years ago. I've been in a wheelchair since then, and I've adapted just fine, though. I mean, I can cook my own food, I can wipe my own ass, I can suck my own dick. I've got a lot going for me.
Bringing up limitations, you don't have a lot of limitations. You work full time, you have a car, you drive, and so do you have, I guess, how do you drive? Is there any sort of difference?
With hand controls.
That's what I'd figure. So
It's something that looks basically like a bike handle that hooks up underneath the steering column to the back of the pedals, and you just push the handle down for the gas and forward for the brake, and one hand on that, one hand on the steering wheel. Automatic transmission. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, that makes sense. How important to you is doing stand-up? How big a part of your life has that become in the last year and a half?
It's been a pretty big part, in that it's like one of my main outlets, and it's like kind of obviously a big part of my social life as well. But yeah, it's kind of the thing that allows me to have something that's not just like work and sleep and some of the other things going on in my life. It's like something that's just it's not just for fun, because there's also like the work that goes into the writing and the preparing sets and everything like that, but that's like the fun, challenging work. It makes me feel like I'm working towards something, but it's also like something that, again, gives my mind something to focus on that isn't just like all the hassle of life.
Where would you ultimately see yourself going with stand-up?
Where I'd really like to go is owning a club. Like,
okay.
Yeah, either like owning a comedy club or some kind of club or something like that. Or, I mean, yeah, it'd be cool to be like a touring professional comedian, filling up stadiums
dreams,
and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I see myself kind of more as like a businessman, business owner, and I'd like to be kind of peers with some of those people who tour and perform, that sort of thing. So if I'm not going to be touring alongside them, offering a venue where they could perform at is another way to go about that. It's kind of a side note, but did you guys know that you can get a DUI for being drunk in a wheelchair? True story. Just drunk in a wheelchair, sitting around. Now you got to be in the middle of the road, but it can still happen.
You've also dealt in the past with substance abuse, and so how were you able to put that behind you? And did comedy have any sort of, when you were doing stand-up and things happened, does that have any sort of positive or negative role? I mean, obviously with alcohol, you're constantly in bars doing stand-up, that sort of thing. But I guess how has substance abuse played a role in your life?
Substance kind of have come and gone over my life. There's really been two main instances where it was really a struggle. And comedy didn't really come into play until after the second one.
Right.
But when I was in college, I told you I took the scenic route through college. It took me 7 years to finish.
Yeah.
Part of that's because I was far more interested in partying than I was classes and schoolwork and that sort of thing. So I did a lot of drugs. I was actually thinking about it recently. It's like there's the list of drugs that I haven't done is basically PCP.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
Like people say, yeah, what have you done? It's like, well, let me tell you what I haven't done. That's it,
Yeah.
And the one that really kind of caught up with me, and it was like 7 years ago back when this happened, was heroin. I was doing heroin for 2 years, and eventually it got to the point where my life was miserable enough that I literally called the cops on myself and said, here's my drugs, take my drugs, and take me to jail. And then I did. I didn't actually go to jail. Is a weird sort of book and release sort of a thing that probably only happened because I had turned myself in. But I ended up going to treatment, going through drug court, and ended up getting that possession charge dropped actually, which was cool. Yeah, so I was sober for a period of time through that, and then started drinking and so forth for years after that. But then I got a couple of DUIs. Whenever my first DUI happened, that's part of what kind of pushed me into getting involved with comedy. Because at that point in time, I basically the routine that I had in life was like wake up, go to work, leave the office, go to the bar, get drunk and go home, and then like rinse and repeat. Like every day I would just go to work, then go to the bar, and then go home. And then once I got that DUI, I was like, well, I can't just go to the bar and drive home anymore. So I need something else to be doing, some other form of socialization, a new group of friends and that sort of thing. And then I was like, well, let's see if Bellingham is a comedy scene. Yeah. And so, did the whole online search, and that's where I found out about the Upfront comedy show. And then, went and watched a show, once, went back the next month, watched another show, and then literally went up to the comedians after the show and just introduced myself to them and just struck up a conversation. I remember Brett Emerson being there, and then Brett was the one who told me about the Green Frog. And I was like, well, if you're thinking about getting involved with it, go to the Green Frogs. It's the open mic or whatever, and you can sign up. And so I went there the next week and then watched. I ended up watching for 2 weeks and then signing up the following week.
Do you think that even if you, obviously didn't have this ability, if you were, you probably would have partied and done all those drugs anyway, right? It wasn't any sort of coping thing, really.
No, I've always been a thrill seeker.
Yeah.
I was always, trying to get the biggest rush, the most excitement or whatever. And I'll still, tell people that my favorite high is adrenaline. And whenever I was snowboarding, doing all of that, the thing that I was seeking was the feeling of free fall, jumping off a cliff and that rush that you get from the adrenaline from that. Every time I was ever doing drugs, I was always trying to mimic that feeling, So it wasn't the accident made me all depressed. Life sucks now. I'm gonna get high. No,
right.
I was trying to get high anyway,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean, you talk about adrenaline. Obviously, stand-up's another creative outlet that terrifies a lot of people, getting up on stage in front of strangers to try and make them laugh. So do you feel like you get a good kick of adrenaline from doing that every time?
Yeah, definitely. And there's the performance jitters and everything, and obviously sometimes those are more than others, but in a lot of ways, kind of the rush that I get from doing comedy is a lot like the rush that I used to get snowboarding, and that like for me, like the best feeling snowboarding was like jumping off a 30-foot cliff or something like that into a steep landing, and then like that feeling of free fall. And part of what was so exciting about that was whenever you're riding, you don't just kind of like ride and it's like, oh, here's a cliff, I'm going to jump off of it. Like you ride, you pick your spot, you post up at the top of it. It's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And you got to get yourself pumped up for it. And then it's like, okay, here we go. And then like you drop in and then you approach it and then you jump off and then like, let's see how it goes sort of a thing. There's that moment where it's just commitment and there's no turning back and you just got to go for it. And there's a lot of parallels there with stand-up comedy in that like, you don't just like go out there and wing it unless you're an improv comic or doing crowd work or something. But like, there's the preparation, you get your jokes and everything like that. But then when you're going on stage, it's that same sort of trepidation like at the top of the cliff. It's like, okay, is this going to go well? Let's find out. And then once you get on stage and you're talking to the microphone, and you're committed. I mean, you can bail out if you want, but it's like, let's see how these go.
A couple of bonus questions here that I like to ask all comedians that do this program. And this one, unless there's something else, but what is the closest you've ever come to dying?
I mean, an easy answer would be when I broke my back.
Yes.
But there have probably been other times where I was closer than that. Yeah, the easy answer is when I broke my back. I've also, I flipped over a car, but came out relatively unscathed, so that probably wasn't close to die. I'm sure I came close to ODing a couple of times, but we'll go with breaking my back.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah. Yeah, sometimes I feel like that question's, we'll get into a discussion and it's like, oh, you came close to killing yourself? Well, I guess that answers that question, So I like this question because it can be could be either rational or irrational, and people have such a wide variety of fears. But what do you fear most in life? Obviously, you're in a wheelchair, and you're an adrenaline junkie. So what do you really fear?
Yeah, so not heights.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd like to say nothing, but rejection, failure, those are fears.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when you say rejection, and do you mean you say more romantically or just in any facet of life, whether it be a job opportunity or?
Yeah, I mean, mostly I was thinking general, any facet of life. I work in sales, so in sales, that's something you're constantly dealing with is the customer saying no, and that's one of the things And I say that I fear rejection, but I also fear it less than I think a lot of people do because, obviously, in the field that I'm in professionally, it's something that I've had to deal with over the years. So
you're facing it every day, yeah.
But it's still, something that might keep me back from having progressed further than I have so far in my career.
Okay. Do you have any irrational fears, ones you're I'm afraid of this and I don't know why and it's weird?
I don't think so. None that come to mind anyway.
Okay. Because I've had some weird, people, I love getting the irrational ones because it's I'm afraid of, sometimes it's easy. It's I'm afraid of snakes. Yeah. Sometimes it's I'm afraid of goldfish and I don't know why. That's, people have told, it's weird. But I love that because it's and then you're when they can't come up with a reason why, they're there's no triggering incident for me fearing goldfish or fearing whatever. I get panicky. It's such a weird, fear is an interesting, it's just an interesting concept of what people are afraid of. And a lot of us are universally afraid of the same things, like rejection or failure or death. But, or in a lot of cases, public speaking for, you and I, not so much, I guess, as much. But, yeah, I don't know. That's always, I love.
It is an interesting, yeah. Snakes, I used to catch snakes when I was a kid in my yard, and heights, I'd jump off cliffs given the chance. And,
yeah.
Needles, I used to poke myself. So,
yeah.
a lot of the normal irrational fears, I don't I don't have anything with those. Yeah.
You ever when you're ever if you have to go to the hospital or get shots or an IV, you're like, let me do this. I know how. I'm just that's
yes. Oh my God, no. Honestly, anytime I have to go to the hospital and get blood drawn or have an IV put in, it's so frustrating now. That's literally the last time I went to get blood drawn, literally I had to go back the second day because they couldn't find a vein.
Oh man.
The phlebotomist, the professional vein finder, poked me 3 times and couldn't get a good vein, and then I had to come back the next day, and it still took 3 tries until they finally got it.
My thanks to Nate for being on the program. If you'd like to contact us, you can message us or comment on the Are You Serious Facebook page. You can also check us out on SoundCloud and YouTube, where longer podcast versions of this show are posted. We'll be back again soon with another installment, but until then, I'm Matt Benoit for Are You Serious? Keep it right here for more great local programming on KMRE 102.3 FM, Bellingham.
When the lights get low